She looked me dead in the eyes, completely calm, and said it like it cost her nothing at all. "You're mine now." And just like that, my entire existence flipped upside down and never came back. Let me tell you something real about waking up as a fox. It is not peaceful. It is not magical. You open your eyes, you see paws where your hands should be, and your brain just stops working for a full second. You open your mouth to say something reasonable. Nothing comes out, just a tiny sound that no one would ever take seriously. That was me. 24 years old, convenience store job, ramen 4 nights a week, one dying houseplant. Then a truck hit me on a Tuesday and I stopped being any of those things. I didn't even see it coming. One second I was standing at a crosswalk. Next second, black. Nothing. Like someone turned off a switch. And then I opened my eyes inside a crystal cage on a private jet cruising at 40,000 feet. I panicked immediately. I threw myself against the cage walls over and over. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. Then I spun in circles, which I discovered instantly is deeply embarrassing when you have 9 tails behind you. 9 tails. I looked back at them, counted slowly. 9. All white. Fanned out like I was showing off at the worst possible moment. A 9-tailed fox. I knew exactly what that meant. Ancient, divine creature. Thousands of years of mythology across all of Asia. Something between a god and a natural disaster, depending on which legend you believed. And I was apparently one of those things now. The jet landed. The cage was carried through a private terminal with no lines, no questions, just fast and expensive silence. Then I saw the building. Glass and steel rising so high I couldn't see the top. A lobby with an actual indoor waterfall. Like someone looked at nature and decided they wanted it inside, but fancier and twice as costly. That kind of building. Elevator, 42nd floor. The doors opened and I was carried into a space that looked like a magazine nobody could afford. Everything white and gray and deliberately cold. Art on the walls worth more than entire neighborhoods I'd lived in. The woman who set my cage on the floor looked at me exactly once. "She'll be with you shortly," she said. Like I had an appointment. I sat in my cage and waited. And then Elena Choy walked through the door and the whole room felt different immediately. I knew the name. Everyone knew it. Choy Industries, electronics, real estate, shipping, pharma. Serious money in every direction. Elena Choy became the youngest CEO in the company's history at 23, right after her father had a stroke. 3 years later, she had doubled the company's value and become the kind of person whose name makes boardrooms go quiet. 26 years old, 5'4", white blouse, gray trousers. She looked like uncertainty had never once occurred to her. She stopped in front of my cage. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us moved for a long, strange moment. Then she said, completely flat, "9 tails, interesting." That was her entire reaction, not one extra word. She turned to her assistant without missing a beat. "Put his things in the east sitting room, have the vet come Tuesday." And she walked away to answer a phone call. I sat in my cage thinking, that's really it? That's the whole welcome? The cage opened. A housekeeper lifted me out gently and carried me to a room with floor-to-ceiling windows on every side. The whole city stretched out below like a map drawn just for me to stare at. She set me on a white couch with no name I knew. "Be good," she said, a little nervously, like she wasn't entirely sure that instruction applied to whatever I was. I sat on the couch. I looked at the city below. I thought about my houseplant back home. It was definitely dead by now. The first thing I learned about Elena Choy was that she operated on a completely different frequency than everyone around her. People came and went through that penthouse all day. Assistants, directors, lawyers in careful suits who measured every word. She listened to all of them with the exact same expression. Neutral. Attentive. Giving away absolutely nothing at any point. But I could feel it. Something in this new body, in the 9 tails, in whatever ancient thing I had become. I could feel people. Their emotions hit me like temperature. Warm, cold, somewhere complicated in between. I didn't choose it. It just happened. The man who came at 11 with quarterly reports felt cold all the way through. Calculated. Rehearsed down to his breathing. He placed a folder on her desk and explained numbers with the ease of someone who had practiced this exact version many times. Except the numbers were wrong. Not wrong like a math error. Wrong like something built carefully on purpose by someone patient. She nodded and said, "Good," and made a note. He glanced at me once on his way out and then looked away very quickly. He was afraid of something. Not of her specifically. Of being discovered. Those are 2 very different kinds of fear, and I felt both. The woman who came at 2, Soo Jin, chief of staff, ran warm on the surface with anxiety moving fast underneath it. She delivered 3 messages and mentioned almost casually that Marcus had called again and was looking forward to Friday. Elena did not react to this in any visible way, but her pen stopped moving for exactly 2 full seconds before it started again. I caught that. I'm almost certain Soo Jin did not. I filed it somewhere in the back of whatever mind I now had. Important. That night Elena worked at her desk until 2 in the morning, and I know this because I was awake for every single minute of it. I sat on the white couch and watched the city lights and tried to make sense of the fact that I was a divine mythological creature. A divine mythological creature who, until last Tuesday, had been eating discounted ramen and failing to keep one small plant alive. At some point, I got up and walked through the penthouse while Elena was still working. 14 rooms total, I counted carefully. 3 separate kitchens. A library with real books on real shelves. Worn spines, pages turned, actually read by a real person. A room that held nothing but a single piano. Dust on the keys. Thin but definite. Nobody had played it in a very long time. And then a locked door at the far end of a hallway I almost didn't explore. I pressed close to the gap along the bottom edge. Paper, old documents underneath that, and something else. The smell of fear that had soaked into walls over many careful hours. I sat in front of that door until the sky outside started going gray. Elena found me there when she finally left her desk. She stopped walking, looked at the door, looked at me. Something crossed her face that I couldn't fully read. Then she said nothing. She picked me up, carried me to the kitchen, and set me in front of a crystal bowl that already had a name printed on the side. My name. She had already given me one. I learned this from the housekeeper earlier. The name she chose was Snow. She named me Snow. I'm a nine-tailed divine spirit of ancient and serious power, and my name is apparently Snow. Fantastic. I ate the salmon in the crystal bowl and tried not to think about it, while Elena leaned against the counter across from me. She was already dressed for the day, already fully switched on. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other, the day already running. That room is off limits, she said, looking directly at me like I was someone who needed to be told clearly. Then she added, I don't know why I'm telling you that. And she left without waiting to see how I reacted. I sat there with my salmon and thought about it. She knew exactly why. She just wasn't ready to say the real reason out loud yet. On day 4, Marcus arrived. He walked into the penthouse the way people walk into spaces they have already decided belong to them. He smiled at Elena the way you smile at something you're generously choosing not to deal with quite yet. Patient, confident. Ellie, he said. I felt her react to that name. It landed wrong every time. She hated it. 1 centimeter shift in her shoulder. Completely invisible, unless you were watching her with a specific and total attention that I had apparently committed to. Marcus, she said back, nothing in her voice. The complete absence of anything is its own kind of language, and she was fluent. He sat down without being invited and picked up an apple from the bowl on the counter and bit into it like it was already his. You look tired, he said, warm and concerned and practiced. The family's been asking. The board meeting is in 3 weeks. You should rest before that, Ellie. He said it like advice. I felt it land like something else entirely. A reminder, a warning. He noticed me for the first time, tilted his head. You got a fox? Elena said. He came with the penthouse without looking up. Marcus leaned down and snapped his fingers at me the way people snap at dogs when they want fast, unthinking obedience. I looked at his fingers. I looked at his face. I turned around and walked slowly to the other side of the room. I did not hurry. He laughed. Rude little thing. Elena said without expression, he has good taste. And then went back to her phone call. That was the first time I heard something in her voice that was not completely flat. Something dry and quiet and almost like warmth. I turned from across the room and looked at her. She was already deep in the call, but the corner of her mouth had moved. Once. Marcus left 20 minutes later, and then something pulled me toward the chair he had been sitting in. I jumped up into it. The smell hit me immediately. Expensive cologne on top. Underneath that, something synthetic, electronic. Small and very deliberate. He had brought something into the penthouse, and based on the smell still sitting in that chair, he had not taken it back out. I jumped down and started searching. Walls, panels, decorative edges, anywhere something flat and small could be pressed and hidden. It took 20 minutes. Behind a panel near the entrance hallway, a device. Flat, black, exactly the size of a large coin. A listening device. Marcus had been recording everything said inside this penthouse. Every conversation, every word, every call. My options in that moment were genuinely limited. I was a fox, with no hands, no voice, and no way to send a message directly. So I found the nearest expensive-looking lamp and knocked it off its table. It hit the marble floor loud enough to echo through walls. 3 people appeared in under 30 seconds. Elena came last, walking quickly but not running. She was not someone who ran. She looked at the lamp on the floor. She looked at me, sitting near the wall. She looked at the wall panel just behind me. I looked at the panel. I looked at her face. I looked back at the panel again. I held her gaze and waited for her to understand. She stared at me for what felt like longer than it probably was. Then she walked over slowly and pressed the edge of the panel. It clicked, opened. The device sat in the small, dark space behind it, exactly where Marcus had pressed it against the wall and left it. Elena did not move for 10 full seconds. She stood completely still, looking at that device like she was counting something in her head. Then she stood up, walked to her office at a normal pace, closed the door quietly, and made one phone call lasting 40 seconds. Her voice was completely level throughout every single word of it. When she came back out, she looked at me in a different way. Not warmer. Elena Choy did not do warm, but recalibrated. Like something important had been moved from one column into another. She picked me up, held me against her chest, stood at the window looking out at the city, spread 42 floors below us both. You found that, she said. Not asking, just saying it out loud to confirm it was real. I said nothing because I had no voice to use. She stood at the window a moment longer than she needed to. Then, quietly, almost to herself, useful. That was the whole thing. But I was beginning to understand that, from Elena Choy, the word useful meant something that other people would say with 10 more words. Over the next 4 days, the penthouse changed in ways that were subtle and deliberate. Staff rotated, cameras shifted position slightly. She never announced any of it, never explained. Things simply moved like tides move. consistently quietly without asking permission. And Elena started talking to me, not like a pet, not commands or soft voices, like the one person she did not have to perform around. Marcus needs my signature on the asset transfer to move forward with this, she said one evening, not looking at me, facing the window. If I sign it, he gets the Eastern portfolio. If I don't sign it, he calls the board vote on my competency. A short pause followed. He thinks I don't know about the vote. She turned then and looked directly at me across the room. I know about the vote. I looked back at her and stayed completely still. 3 board members already in his pocket. He needs 2 more before the meeting. She walked over and sat down next to me on the couch. He's been meeting with Shin every Thursday. Investment committee, old friends. The way she said old friends, like the phrase was borrowed from a language she found slightly ridiculous, precise, deliberate disdain. She reached out and touched the top of my head. One single time. Her hand was steady and the gesture was entirely without performance. He made one mistake, she said, looking back out at the city. He assumed that because I don't talk about it, I must be alone. I sat still under her hand and thought about that sentence, about what it meant, about what she was telling me without saying it. She thought she was speaking to a fox. She had no idea she was talking to something that understood every word and was already planning. Because here is what Elena Choy did not yet know about me. Every night, alone in the dark, I had been discovering what I could do. Night 3, I walked through a solid wall by accident, stood on the other side looking at it, walked back through, did it twice more. Night 5, I felt Marcus's specific emotional frequency from across the city below, 42 floors down, cold, patient, building towards something. Night 7, I sat near the piano with the dusty keys. One of my tails drifted toward it on its own. 3 notes played by themselves. I pulled the tail back immediately and sat very still in the dark for a long time afterward, thinking about what was happening to me. In every myth, 9-tailed foxes develop their power across centuries, across many long lifetimes of slow and deliberate accumulation. I had been in this penthouse for 8 days. Something here was accelerating everything. This place, this woman, this specific situation. I did not know yet whether what was waking up inside me was something I should be grateful for or something I should be afraid of. Probably it was both. Most things worth anything turn out to be both at the same time when you look at them long enough, and honestly. Thursday morning I found a small note sitting next to my crystal bowl. Her handwriting. She had been awake before me. 4 words only. Thank you. For the other day. No signature, no explanation. She didn't need either one, and she knew that I would understand. I looked at that note for a long time without moving. Then I ate my salmon and thought about what was happening tonight across the city. Because Marcus was having dinner with Shin from the investment committee tonight. A private dinner, casual, just 2 old friends talking. And I was going to be in that room. He just did not know it yet. And neither, for that matter, did Elena. Drop a comment. Do you think Elena already suspects what snow really is? Because what happens at that dinner changes everything. I walked through a wall for the 3rd time in my life and stood in a restaurant kitchen smelling of garlic and expensive stock. Nobody saw me. Nobody felt me pass. I was there, and then I was there. No door, no sound, no evidence of anything at all. 9-tailed fox. I was starting to understand what that actually meant, and it was considerably more than the myths suggested. The restaurant was called John. Private dining, 3 floors, the kind of place where the menu has no prices, because prices are vulgar. Marcus had booked the back room, corner table, no windows facing the street, the specific choice of someone who doesn't want witnesses. I found a position near the wall where I could see the whole table and pressed myself flat against the baseboards and waited. Marcus arrived first. He sat down, checked his phone twice, and ordered water, before Shin even walked through the door. Comfortable. Ready. Director Shin came in at 7:15, 61 years old. Investment committee, 15 years. The kind of man who moved carefully, always. He shook Marcus's hand and sat down and looked at the menu like a man who already knew what he was going to order but needed a moment. Marcus smiled. Warm, easy. The smile of someone who has done this specific kind of dinner many times and knows exactly how it works. Shin Si, he said. Thank you for coming. I know how busy things have been with the quarterly reviews running at the same time. Shin nodded and said something polite about it being no trouble. His hands were steady on the menu. His chest was tight. I could feel it. He was not comfortable. He was performing comfortable, which is a completely different thing, and the difference was obvious to me now. They ordered. They talked about nothing for 12 minutes. A golf tournament, a mutual acquaintance, a trip someone had recently taken. Marcus was patient. He did not rush. He kept things warm and easy and let the wine arrive and let Shin take 2 full sips before anything. Then he said, almost as an aside, almost like it had just occurred to him, I wanted to talk to you about the board meeting, actually. Shin set his glass down very carefully. Of course, he said. His voice was level. His hands had gone very still on the white tablecloth. I think you know the situation, Marcus said. Still easy, still warm, like they were discussing something unfortunate but manageable. Elena has done remarkable things. Nobody denies that, but the pace she's operating at, the decisions she's been making unilaterally. He paused there and let the pause do some work. He was good at pauses. He knew exactly when silence was more effective than words. The Eastern portfolio expansion without full board consultation, The restructuring of the logistics arm without a formal review process. Shin nodded slowly. He was listening. He was not agreeing yet, but he was listening in the specific way of a man being carefully moved. I'm not talking about removing her, Marcus said. He said it like the idea was almost too serious to bring up, like he was reluctant. I'm talking about a framework, oversight, the kind of structure that protects the company and honestly protects Elena from herself. He said that last part. Protects Elena from herself, with genuine warmth in his voice, like he actually believed it, like he cared. I sat against the baseboard and felt the calculation underneath every single word. Cold, precise, completely without any of the warmth. What are you asking for specifically? Shin said. He kept his voice neutral, but something underneath it had shifted. He was considering. Marcus reached into his jacket and put a single folded document on the table between them. He didn't push it towards Shin, just placed it. A proxy for the board vote, that's all. You vote with me on the competency review, and the oversight structure gets implemented formally. Shin looked at the document without touching it. And if the review goes badly for her, he said. His voice was very quiet and careful. Marcus smiled. Then the company is protected, which is what we both want, which is what every person on that board should want. He said we both want, like it was obvious. Like Shin had already agreed to something and they were simply working out the final details. Shin picked up his wine glass again. He turned it slowly in his fingers. I could feel him. The weight of something he'd been carrying. Not greed, something older than greed. Something closer to fear that had been sitting in him for a long time, looking for a direction. I'll think about it, Shin said finally. He did not touch the document. He did not push it away either. He just left it sitting there. Marcus nodded, like that was exactly the answer he had expected and wanted. He poured more wine and changed the subject immediately. They ate. They talked about nothing again. Marcus told a story about a trip to Jeju that made Shin laugh once, briefly and genuinely. I stayed against the baseboard and thought about the document still folded on the table between their plates and their glasses. A proxy vote. 3 board members already committed. Shin would make 4. 1 more after that, and Marcus could call the review formally. He needed 1 more person. I ran through everything Elena had told me in the evenings, talking to herself while I sat on the couch. She had mentioned 5 board members by name over the past week. Yoon, the man who lied about the numbers, Park, Kim, SEO, and Beck. Yoon was already cold when he came to the penthouse, already afraid of something, already performing in a way that felt long practiced. I was willing to bet Yoon was already in Marcus's pocket, which meant Marcus had 4, which meant he needed exactly 1 more vote. Shin left first. He stood, shook Marcus's hand, and walked out through the main dining room without looking back at the folded document. Marcus watched him go. Then he sat back in his chair and picked up his wine and looked at the ceiling for a moment with quiet satisfaction. He reached out and picked up the document Shin had not taken, put it back in his jacket pocket. He was not worried. He was counting down. I waited until a server came through from the kitchen to clear the table. Then I slipped out through the kitchen wall and into the street. The city was loud and bright and completely indifferent to the fact that a 9-tailed divine fox had just attended a private dinner. I walked 3 blocks in the dark thinking. Not about what I'd heard. I already understood that. About what to do with it. That was harder. I could not speak. I could not write. I could not send an email or make a call or walk up to Elena and explain it in plain language. What I could do was be in places I wasn't supposed to be. Hear things people said when they thought only walls were listening. And I was getting faster at moving through the city. The walls between spaces were becoming easier, like a door I was learning the handle of. I got back to the penthouse at 11:17. Elena was still awake, still at her desk. The city lights behind her were like a painting. She looked up when I came through the door. Through the door, not the wall. I had a key now, it's a long story, and said nothing. She looked back at her work. I jumped up onto the desk, which I had never done before. She looked at me immediately with flat eyes. "No," she said. 1 word. I did not move. She looked at me for a moment. Then, what? Still flat. Still not a real question. I looked at her face and then looked at the notepad on the corner of her desk. Then I looked at her face again. Slow and deliberate. She stared at me. "You want me to write something down?" Her voice was careful now, like she was deciding whether to believe something. I looked at the notepad again, then at her. She picked up her pen slowly and held it over the pad and looked at me waiting. I raised 1 paw. She wrote a letter. Wrong letter. I put the paw down. She tried again. Still wrong. We did this for a long time. It took 47 minutes. 47 minutes of slow and imperfect communication that left us both tense and completely focused. But at the end of it, Elena Choy had written on her notepad, in her own handwriting, in letters I had guided her to 1 at a time, Shin, proxy, Thursday dinner, 4 votes, 1 more. She looked at what she had written. She looked at me. She looked at the notepad again. The room was completely silent for a long time. "You were there," she said. Still quiet, still controlled. But something had shifted behind her eyes, something large and fast and fundamental. I looked at her and stayed still. She set the pen down. She leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for 1 full minute. Then she sat forward. She picked up her phone. She put it down again. She looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her before. It was not warm. Elena Choy did not do warm, and I had stopped expecting it. But it was something adjacent to warm, something close. "You understand me," she said. Not a question this time. A conclusion. The kind that lands differently than a question does. More weight. I looked at her and waited. She looked back at me for a long moment, and I could feel something moving through her, complicated and fast. Not fear. Something more like the specific vertigo of realizing that a thing you thought was one kind of thing is an entirely different kind. "Since when?" she said. Then she stopped herself. "No, don't answer that. I know since when." She picked up her pen again, slowly. She wrote one word on the notepad below everything else. She turned it so I could read it clearly. It said, "everything." I looked at the word. I raised one paw and held it up and kept it there. She watched the paw. She breathed out through her nose once. "Okay," she said, quietly, like she was saying it to herself more than to me. "Okay." She closed the notepad. She set the pen down flat. Then she stood up and walked to the window and stood there for a long time looking at the city below, and I did not interrupt whatever that was. Because Elena Choy had spent 3 years running a company alone, making decisions alone, carrying things alone, trusting no one at all, and she had just found out that the creature sitting on her desk had understood every single word she had ever said inside this penthouse, every conversation she'd had with herself in the quiet, every fear she'd named out loud to an empty room, everything she'd let herself say. That is not a small thing. That is not something you process in 30 seconds and then move forward from like nothing happened at all. So I waited. I sat on her desk and I waited, and the city moved below us, and neither of us said anything for a very long time. Eventually she came back from the window. She sat in her chair. She looked at me with the expression she used when she was deciding something. "The 5th vote," she said. "Do you know who he's targeting?" I looked at her. I raised my paw. Wrong direction. I needed a new system. We worked out a better system over the next hour. She would name people. I would raise the paw when she hit something close to right. "Yoon," she said first. I stayed still. She nodded slightly. She already suspected Yoon, I could feel that. She was confirming, not discovering. "Bark." Still. "Kim." Still. "Seo." Still. "Beck." I raised my paw and held it. She wrote Beck on the notepad and circled it once. "Beck Junseo," she said slowly. "He's been quiet. Too quiet since the logistics restructuring. I noticed, but I didn't." She stopped. She looked at me. "You're faster at this than I expected." I looked back at her. "Don't let that go to your head," she added immediately. I was a 9-tailed divine fox who had spent the evening walking through restaurant walls to attend a private dinner. My head was fine. She looked at the notepad. Yoon confirmed. Beck being approached. Shin considering. 3 already committed. Marcus was close. Very close. 12 days, she said. "The board meeting is in 12 days. She said it the way you say a number when you're measuring it against something. She picked up her phone. This time she didn't put it down. She dialed. Someone answered immediately. Middle of the night, they picked up. "I need everything on Beck Junseo from the last 6 months," she said. "Every meeting, every call he made outside the normal channels." She listened, said 2 more things, hung up, made a second call, then a third. Each one short, precise, like she had scripted them in advance. I watched her work and felt something I had not expected to feel. Something that was not quite admiration, but lived in the same neighborhood. She had known something was wrong. She had been watching and waiting and gathering information for weeks, alone, without telling anyone. And now she had a partner who could go places she couldn't and hear things said in rooms she would never be allowed to enter uninvited. She finished the calls. She looked at me. "Can you get into Yoon's office?" she said. Direct. No softening, no build-up, just the question. I thought about the wall of his office building 3 blocks east. I thought about how walls had been feeling lately, like suggestions mostly. I raised my paw. She wrote something on the notepad and turned it toward me. It said, "Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Look for documents, transfers." I looked at the notepad. I looked at her. She held my gaze for a moment and then said something she probably had not planned to say. "I don't know what you are," she said, "but I'm glad you're here." She said it quickly and then looked back at the notepad immediately, like the words had gotten out before she had time to approve them, and she was not going to acknowledge that that had happened. I sat on her desk and felt the weight of that sentence settle. 3 years alone in this penthouse, making decisions no one helped her make. $11 billion, and not one person in her life she could say that to and mean it the way she meant it when she said it to me. I looked at her profile while she wrote notes and thought about the locked room at the end of the hallway and the smell of old fear. I thought about the piano with the dusty keys and whoever had played it before everything became about the company and the board and Marcus. I thought about the way she ate, or didn't eat. The plate at noon untouched at 4. The way nobody noticed or said anything about it at all. There was a version of Elena Choy before this one. Before CEO. Before the stroke and the emergency handover and the 3 impossible years. And whatever happened to that version, whatever she had put down to pick up everything she was now carrying, it was still in this penthouse, in the locked room, in the dusty piano keys, in the 2 seconds her pen stopped when someone mentioned a name she did not want to hear. I was going to find out what it was, not because it was relevant to Marcus and the board, because it was relevant to her, to actually her. She worked for another hour, and then finally, she walked to the bedroom. The lights went off one by one through the penthouse. I stayed on the desk for a while longer. Then I jumped down and walked to the end of the hallway, where the locked door waited in the dark. I stood in front of it. I thought about walls and how they had been feeling lately, like suggestions, like lines drawn in chalk, not stone. I pressed forward slowly. The door did not resist. I was through it in 3 seconds and standing on the other side in the dark. The room was small, smaller than I had expected from the outside. A desk, a chair, filing cabinets along one wall, a single photograph. I walked toward the photograph first because that is what you do when you find one in a room that smells like long-carried fear. A man and a girl. The man was older, 60 maybe. The girl was young, maybe 16, with short hair and a very serious expression. The serious expression I recognized. The short hair was different. The age was different. But the eyes were exactly the same, unmistakably. Elena. And a man I had not seen in the penthouse. Not in any photograph on any wall outside this room. Not once in the whole penthouse. Her father. It had to be. The shape of the jaw was the same, the way they were both standing. Straight, slightly apart, not touching. He was in a hospital gown. The photograph had been taken in a hospital. He was holding a folder against his chest with both arms. And he was smiling. A real smile, not performed. The kind that sits differently on a face than the practiced version does. Real and tired. Elena was not smiling in the photograph. She was standing beside him with her arms at her sides, and her expression was completely still. But her hand, her right hand, was gripping the edge of his hospital gown at the side. Just the fabric, just barely, just enough. I sat in front of that photograph for a long time in the dark and thought about everything I was beginning to understand about this woman. Then I turned to the filing cabinets. I could not open them. No hands, still a problem. But I could smell what was inside them. Paper. Old paper. Medical documents, financial records mixed in. And something else, and something recent. Something that had been added not long ago. Recent paper has a different smell from old paper. This was within the last few weeks. Someone had been in this room very recently. Elena had been in this room very recently. Coming here to look at something, or to remember something, or maybe both at the same time. I walked out through the door, through it, not past it, and stood in the hallway and thought about what I was going to do with all of this. In 12 days, Marcus would call a board vote. He needed one more proxy after Shin. He was moving toward Baek Junseo with quiet patience. If he got 5 votes, the competency review would be called formally. The company lawyers would take over. Elena would be frozen out. Everything she had built in 3 years while running on 4 hours of sleep and untouched lunch plates would be handed to Marcus instead. Marcus, who sat in private dining rooms and put unsigned proxy documents on tables, and let the silence do the work, patient as a season. I went back to my couch and sat in the dark and thought about tomorrow night in Yoon's office and whatever was in those filing cabinets. I thought about Shin, turning the wine glass slowly in his hands, and the weight he'd been carrying that was older than greed, fear-shaped. I thought about Baek Junseo going quiet since the logistics restructuring and what Marcus would offer a quiet man to make him less quiet. And I thought about the fifth tale, my fifth tale, which had started producing a faint light in the dark 3 nights ago without warning. Just a glow. Faint. Blue-white. Like something waking up slowly and not entirely sure it was ready to be awake yet, but waking up anyway. I did not know what that meant. I did not know what I was becoming or how fast, or what I would be capable of when whatever this was finished. What I knew was that I had 12 days. Elena had 12 days, and I had access to every room in the city that had relevant walls. That was enough. That had to be enough. I curled my 9 tails around myself in the dark and waited for morning to arrive. Morning arrived like Elena arrived. Without announcement, fully formed, already in motion, before anyone around it had adjusted to the fact. She was at her desk by 6. Coffee, phone. The day already running behind her eyes before she'd finished the first sip. She looked at me when I came into the office and said, "Tonight, 9 o'clock. Yoon's office on the 14th floor, south side of the building." I looked at her. She had already mapped the building, already identified the office, already decided this was happening before I woke up. "I need anything related to external transfers in the last 4 months," she said, "and anything with Marcus's name on it directly." She looked at me for a moment. "I know you can't bring documents out, but if you can see what's there and confirm what I'm looking for..." She stopped. She looked at the notepad. She looked at me. "We need a faster system," she said. "The letter-by-letter approach is too slow." We spent the morning building a new system. Numbers for categories. 1 tap for yes, 2 for no, 3 for something more complicated. It took 3 hours and a lot of starting over, but by noon we had something that worked well enough to move faster than the night before. She fed me at noon, salmon again, in the crystal bowl. She set it down and said, "You're going to get tired of salmon," without looking at me. I was not going to get tired of salmon. I had eaten convenience store ramen for 4 nights a week for 2 years. Salmon was fine. Salmon was great. She sat on the kitchen counter while I ate, which she had never done before. She usually left immediately. This time she stayed. My father used to say that the worst thing you can do in a negotiation is let the other person know what you actually want, she said. She was looking at the window, not at me, talking to the room the way she did sometimes, half to herself, half to whoever was listening. He said the moment they know, you've handed them the only thing they need to undo you. Want is a weakness if it's visible. She paused. I've been running this company for 3 years, and I don't think Marcus knows what I actually want. He thinks he does. He doesn't. She looked at me then. Direct. He thinks I want to win. He thinks this is about the company, about the portfolio, about the vote. She picked up her coffee. It's not about any of those things, she said. And then she stopped and did not say what it actually was about. She slid off the counter, picked up her phone, walked back toward the office. At the doorway she paused, without turning around fully. "Tonight," she said again, like a confirmation. Like she needed to say it twice to make it real. Then she was gone back into the day. I sat with my salmon bowl and thought about what she had said, about what Marcus thought she wanted, about what she had stopped just before saying. The locked room was at the end of the hallway. The photograph was on the desk inside it. Her father in a hospital gown holding a folder. Her hand on the edge of his gown, just barely. Just enough to mean something significant without saying it where anyone could see. It was not about the company. It was not about the board vote or the Eastern portfolio or the competency review or any of the rest of it. I thought I was beginning to understand what it actually was about. And if I was right, then Marcus had miscalculated everything from the start. Evening came. The city outside the windows shifted from the bright, sharp light of afternoon into the softer, complicated light of almost dark. At 8:30, Elena came out of her office and stood in the doorway of the sitting room where I was waiting. She looked at me directly. "Be careful," she said. One more word than she usually used for instructions. She noticed that too. She looked away. "Just be careful." I left through the building's service exit, technically through the wall next to the service exit, but the effect was similar enough. Yoon's building was 3 blocks east and 12 floors shorter than Elena's. The 14th floor had lights still on in 2 windows. One of those windows belonged to Director Yoon. I could feel him inside before I was through the outer wall, awake, active, not alone. I stopped in the hallway outside his office and pressed close to the door. 2 voices, Yoon and someone else, someone I recognized. Not Marcus, someone who worked for Marcus. I had seen him twice in the lobby of Elena's building in the past week without fully registering it. Mid-30s, quiet. The kind of person you don't notice, which is of course the point. He was sitting across from Yoon at the desk. "The numbers for March need to be adjusted before the meeting," the man was saying. Calm, conversational, like discussing a calendar item. "I've already adjusted them twice," Yoon said. His voice was lower, tighter. The fear in him was immediate and close to the surface now. "Then adjust them a 3rd time," the man said, still calm. "The gap needs to look consistent with Q1 projections, not with what actually happened." Yoon was quiet. I could feel him sitting there, the specific quality of someone who made a decision a long time ago and now lives inside it. "What if she notices?" Yoon said. Not a protest, more like a man trying to calculate risk with numbers that keep changing on him. "She won't have time to notice," the man said. "The review gets called before the meeting. By the time she's looking at March, it won't matter." Silence. Then Yoon said, "And after, when it's done?" The question of a man who needs to know there is an after, that he survives it. "After, you stay exactly where you are," the man said. "Your position, your title. Everything stays. Marcus values continuity in the right people." The word right. The specific pause around the word right. I felt Yoon register it and then choose not to register it. Self-protection. I moved through the wall into the office. Neither of them saw me. I was low and still, and the office was large enough that the corners were dark. I found the filing cabinet against the south wall. I walked along the row of drawers and breathed slowly. Paper, older paper, and then there. 4th drawer from the bottom. Recent paper. The smell of printing ink that was not old. Documents added within the past 2 to 3 weeks. I could not open the drawer. I could not take anything. But I was close enough to feel the shape of what was in there by smell and weight. Multiple documents. Transfer records. I had learned what those smelled like from Elena's own filing. The texture of financial paper. And on top, the most recently placed, something with Marcus's name on it. I could not read it. But the weight and size suggested a letter. A formal letter. The kind with a signature at the bottom. The kind that became evidence, if it ever needed to be evidence for something. I moved back through the wall and into the hallway and listened to the rest of the conversation from outside until the second man left. Then I went back to the penthouse and sat on Elena's desk and waited. She came out of her office at 10:45 and looked at me. "Well," she said. 1 word. I began tapping. She picked up the notepad and pen, and we went through the system we had built that morning. "Yoon?" "Confirmed. External consultant meeting tonight. Numbers being adjusted for March. 4th drawer, south cabinet. Transfer records. Letter." She wrote each piece down as I confirmed it. When we finished, she looked at the notepad for a long time, then she looked at me. "A letter with his signature," she said. I tapped once. Yes. She pressed her lips together very briefly. "That's what I needed," she said. She picked up her phone immediately, made 1 call, left a message, made a 2nd call. Someone answered this time, late as it was. "I need a legal preservation order on the contents of Director Yoon's office filing cabinet. 4th drawer, south wall, tonight, if possible." She listened, gave details, hung up. She was already moving to her laptop before the call had fully ended. Already 3 steps ahead again. I sat on the desk and watched her and felt something I had been feeling more often over the past few days without quite naming it until now. It was not admiration exactly. It was something more specific. The feeling of watching someone do the thing they were actually made to do. She was built for this. The pressure, the calculation, the ability to hold 12 different things at once and keep moving. All of it. Built for it. And she had been doing it completely alone for 3 years in a penthouse where nobody noticed if she ate lunch or slept or played the piano. She looked up from the laptop and caught me watching her. She held my gaze for a moment. "Stop looking at me like that," she said. "Like what?" I tapped. She had learned my system fast enough that she could read the taps without looking at the notepad now. Like you're trying to figure something out, she said. She looked back at the laptop. You're not going to figure it out. Let it go. I stayed where I was on the desk. I did not let it go. I was a 9-tailed divine fox with 6 more nights before the board meeting, and I had things to do. But I sat there while she worked, and I thought about what she had said in the kitchen that afternoon. Not about the company, not about the vote, something else, something she had stopped just before saying. And the photograph in the locked room. And the piano no one had touched. 11 days left. Marcus was patient and prepared and very nearly had everything he needed, but he had made one fundamental error from the start. He had assumed she was alone. He had built his entire plan around the assumption that Elena Choy was isolated and therefore manageable. She was not alone. She had not been alone for 22 days. She just hadn't known it yet until about 24 hours ago. Now she knew. And watching her work at that laptop at 11 in the evening, I felt the balance of 12 days shift in a way Marcus couldn't feel. He was still counting votes in a private dining room, thinking he was operating without witnesses. He had no idea what had been in that restaurant. He had no idea what had been in Yoon's office. He had no idea what was sitting on Elena Choi's desk right now and listening to everything. I curled my tails around myself and watched the city lights and waited. We had 11 days and a letter in a filing cabinet and each other. That was more than enough. I was becoming more certain of that with every wall I walked through and every room I found my way into uninvited. Whatever I was turning into, whatever these 9 tails and this accelerating power actually meant, I was going to be ready when it mattered. 11 days. The 5th tail was glowing faintly in the dark again. I pressed it flat and kept watching the city and kept thinking, kept planning. Marcus had 1 more vote to collect, and I was going to be in that room too when he tried to collect it. He just didn't know it yet. Drop a comment. Do you think Elena is starting to feel something she doesn't have a word for yet? Because what she finds in that locked room next episode changes everything about why she's really fighting Marcus. On day 10 before the board meeting, Elena unlocked the door at the end of the hallway and walked inside without looking at me first. I had been watching that door for 11 days, waiting for her to open it herself. Not pushing, just waiting. Foxes are patient creatures. She left it open behind her. I took that as an invitation and followed her in quietly and sat near the doorway and did not go further. The room was exactly as I had seen it that first night. Small desk, filing cabinets, the single photograph, the smell of careful old fear. Elena stood in front of the desk and looked at the photograph for a long time. She did not touch it. She just looked at it and breathed. Then she sat in the chair and opened the middle drawer and took out a folder. Old paper. The kind that had been handled many times. She opened it. I could see documents from where I sat. Medical records, the logo of a hospital I recognized from the building district east. She read for several minutes without moving. The room was completely quiet except for the city noise that came through the sealed windows. Then she closed the folder. She did not put it back. She held it against her chest with both arms, the way her father held his in the photograph. I sat in the doorway and watched her and did not make a sound. There are moments when presence is the only thing you can offer someone. After a long time, she said, without turning around, "He's still alive. My father. He didn't die from the stroke. He's in a facility east of the city." She said it like she was confirming something she already knew, like saying it out loud made it take up the right amount of space, finally. "Marcus has been managing his care arrangement since the handover," she said. "The facility, the doctors, the ongoing treatment decisions." She set the folder on the desk. She turned the chair slightly so she was looking at the wall and not the photograph directly anymore. "If the board votes against me and the competency review removes me from the CEO position, the care arrangement gets reviewed with it." She said, "Reviewed the way you say a word when it means something much darker than the word itself suggests on the surface of things." "Marcus has been very careful never to say that directly," she said. "He doesn't have to. The structure says it. The paperwork says it." She finally turned and looked at me in the doorway. Her expression was the most unguarded I had seen it since I arrived in the penthouse. Not broken. Elena Choy did not break, but stripped of the performance layer, the actual face underneath everything she usually wore for the world. "That's what he actually has," she said. "Not just the votes. That's the real leverage. That's what this has always been about underneath." I looked at her and stayed still and felt the weight of what she had just told me settle into the room like something physical and dense. 3 years. She had been running this company for 3 years with that, sitting underneath everything. Every decision, every board meeting, every untouched lunch plate, every night at the desk until 2 a.m, every conversation she'd had alone in this penthouse. She had been doing all of it with Marcus, holding the one thing she could not afford to lose over her head, like weather that never broke. "I've been trying to find a way to separate the care arrangement from the company structure for 8 months, she said. "Legally, cleanly." "Every path I found he had already closed. He's thorough. I'll give him that." She said it without admiration, just accurate assessment. She looked at me for a moment, then she said something I did not expect. "I need to get into the facility. I haven't been able to go." I tapped twice on the floor. "No." She looked at me. I tapped the way we had worked out meant explain more. She understood immediately. "He has someone watching the facility entrance. Has for 2 years. If I show up, it triggers a provision in the care arrangement document." She pressed her lips together briefly. "The provision gives Marcus emergency authority over treatment decisions if I interfere with care." She said interfere the same way she had said reviewed earlier, with the specific weight of a word that means something it refuses to say directly. "So I can't go. I've been sending updates through a lawyer. He knows I'm fighting. He knows why." She stopped. He told me to win. She said the last sentence differently from all the others, quieter, more careful, like something she was keeping safe by not saying too loudly. I sat in the doorway of that small room and thought about the photograph, the real smile, the hospital gown, her hand on the fabric edge. I thought about walls, about how they had been feeling lately, about the restaurant 3 blocks away and Yoon's office on the 14th floor. I thought about the facility east of the city and whether it had walls the same way other buildings had walls, like suggestions, like chalk lines. I looked at Elena. She was watching me with an expression that had something new in it, something that looked almost like she was thinking the same thought. "You could go," she said slowly, like the idea was forming as she said it. "Nobody's watching for a white fox. There's no provision for that." She looked at the folder on the desk. "I can't send documents through the lawyer without Marcus knowing, but if you could get there—" She stopped herself. She looked at me carefully. "That's too much to ask," she said. "You've already done more than I had any right to expect." I looked at her for a moment. Then I stood up and walked across the room and sat directly in front of her chair and looked up at her face. She looked down at me. Something shifted behind her eyes. The specific shift of someone choosing to believe something they can't fully explain. She reached down and picked me up and held me the way she had the day I found the listening device, against her chest, looking at the city. 10 days, she said. "The board meeting is in 10 days. She was quiet for a moment. "He's going to move on Beck this week. I can feel it." She set me down on the desk. She pulled the notepad toward her and picked up the pen. "Tell me what you need to know about the facility." We worked for 2 hours. She knew more about the facility than she had let on. The layout, the staff rotation, the specific wing and room. She had never been inside, but she had paid for information about it for 2 years, through channels Marcus could not easily trace back to her. The facility was called Hanyang Care, 12 stories. His room was on the 8th floor, east wing, 3rd door from the elevator bank. Staff rotation changed at 6 in the morning and 10 at night. The 20 minutes between shifts was the quietest the floor ever got. She wrote all of it down on the notepad and pushed it toward me, and I read it carefully and held it in whatever this body used for memory. "His name is Choy Bonggho," she said. She said it quietly, like a name she did not say out loud very often, like it meant too much to say casually. "He won't know what you are. I don't know what you are." She looked at me directly. "But he'll know you came from me. Tell him that somehow." I looked at her. I tapped once. "Yes." She held my gaze for a moment longer than she needed to. Then she looked back at the notepad. "The letter in Yoon's cabinet," she said, shifting back into the operational layer. "The preservation order went through this morning. My lawyer has access to the contents now. Marcus doesn't know yet." She made a small mark on the notepad. "That's one thing secured." Shin is still deciding. He hasn't given Marcus the proxy yet. I have maybe 4 days before Marcus finds another approach with him. She tapped the pen against the notepad twice. "Beck is the variable. If Marcus gets to Beck before I can, he has 5. The meeting gets called early." She looked at me. "I need to know what Marcus is offering Beck. The same approach as Shin, a private meeting, something on the table." I thought about the restaurant, about the unsigned proxy document placed without being pushed, about the specific patience of a man counting down. I tapped the number we had worked out for. "I will find out." She wrote it down. She did not say thank you. She just made another mark on the notepad. That was Elena. Every mark on the notepad was a kind of acknowledgement. Every mark meant I heard you and it counts, and we keep going. That night I went to the facility east of the city. Hanyang Care was quieter than I expected from the outside. A low, wide building, not 12 stories as Elena had understood, but 8. The information she had paid for was slightly wrong on the height. I noted that and moved forward through the outer wall at 10:15. The 8th floor smelled of antiseptic and something older underneath. The specific quality of air in a space where time moves differently, slower, more careful. The kind of air that exists in rooms where people are waiting for things that have no fixed arrival time at all. East wing. 3rd door from the elevator bank. I found it and pressed through the door and stopped just inside and let my eyes adjust. The room was not large. A bed near the window, a chair beside it, a small table with a water glass and 2 books and a folded newspaper. The man in the bed was awake. He was lying with his eyes open, looking at the ceiling with the alert stillness of someone who thinks a lot. Choy Bonggho, 63 years old. Elena's father. The man from the photograph, older now, the stroke visible in the way he held his left side. But the eyes were the same as in the photograph. Sharp, assessing. The same eyes that looked at me from Elena's face every single day. He turned his head when he felt me enter and looked at me for a long moment without speaking. He did not seem frightened, just alert. A white fox, 9 tails, standing in his room at 10:15 at night, having come through a wall. He looked at me and said nothing for a while. Then he said very quietly, "She sent you?" Not a question. The same habit of stating things as conclusions that Elena had. Same voice pattern. I walked forward slowly and sat near the base of his bed and looked up at him. He looked back at me with an expression I recognized immediately. It was the expression Elena used when she was deciding whether to believe something she couldn't fully explain, but couldn't fully dismiss either. He made the decision faster than she had. "All right," he said, quietly, like he was agreeing to something that required very little convincing. He reached to the small table and picked up the folded newspaper. He opened it. Inside, tucked between pages, was a handwritten document. Several pages. Dense writing. He held it out toward me, and I looked at it from the bed's edge, unable to take it. He understood immediately. "I've been writing this for 8 months," he said. Everything I signed during the handover that I didn't fully understand at the time. He set it on the edge of the bed closest to me. There's a provision Marcus added to the care arrangement 11 months after the stroke. He said it the way Elena said certain words, with the weight of something that means more than it says on the surface, accurate and careful. I signed it during a period when my cognition was significantly compromised. My doctor at the time was replaced 2 weeks after I signed. He looked at me steadily. That document gives Marcus authority over my care if Elena's position at the company is formally challenged. He paused. What he didn't know, what I made sure he didn't know, is that I had a second evaluation done 7 months ago, privately. He reached back to the table and picked up a small envelope, sealed. My cognitive function has recovered significantly. The evaluation confirms it. He held the envelope out. This evaluation means the original signing of that provision can be legally challenged. The signature was compromised. He looked at me, and something in his face was the same thing I had seen in Elena's face in the doorway of the locked room. Stripped back. Real. She can't come here. I know why. I've known for 2 years. He set the envelope on top of the handwritten pages near the bed's edge. Tell her, he started. He stopped. He looked at the window for a moment. The city lights were visible from his bed if he turned his head. Tell her I know she's been fighting. Tell her I've been fighting too from here. Tell her the evaluation exists. Tell her to get it to her lawyer. He looked back at me. And tell her... He stopped again. Longer this time. He looked at his hands on the folded newspaper for a moment. Tell her I heard what she said on her birthday 2 years ago. Through the lawyer. She said she was sorry she wasn't there. He paused. I tell her there's nothing to be sorry for. Tell her I've been watching her run that company from in here and I have nothing but... He stopped. He pressed his lips together briefly. The same gesture Elena made when words were getting out, ahead of what she had approved for them to do. Tell her she's doing exactly what I would have done, he said finally, quietly. Tell her that's not a small thing. Tell her I said that. I sat very still near the base of his bed and felt the weight of every word he had just said settle into this body that carried things differently than a human body does. I could not take the envelope. I could not take the pages. I had no hands, no bag, no way to carry physical objects through walls with me, but I had the information, every word, every detail, the evaluation, the provision, the 7 months of private cognitive recovery. All of it. He watched me for a moment. He seemed to understand that I was memorizing. He nodded once, slowly, the way you nod when something is confirmed. She'll know what to do with it, he said. She always knows what to do. That was never the problem. He said it with something that was not quite a smile, but lived right next to one. I stayed for a few more minutes. He did not try to fill the silence. He just lay there and looked at the ceiling and breathed and existed. Before I left, I sat near the window for a moment and looked at the city lights he could see from his bed. The same city, different floor, same view. Elena at 42 floors, looking down at it every night, working until 2 in the morning. Him at 8 floors, looking at the same lights, both of them fighting, both of them alone, both of them doing it in the specific and exhausting way of people who cannot afford to stop. I went back through the wall and into the night and moved through the city toward the penthouse with everything he had told me held carefully. Elena was awake when I came through the door. She was standing in the hallway outside the locked room. She looked at me immediately. She did not ask if I had gone. She could see from the way I was moving that I had been somewhere significant. She picked up the notepad. We worked for an hour, every detail, the evaluation, the compromised signature provision, the 7 months of private cognitive recovery, the name of the private doctor, the sealed envelope in the room, the handwritten pages, the lawyer's name he wanted her to contact directly. She wrote everything without speaking. Her face was completely still throughout. The operational layer was fully on and fully in control. When we finished, she set the pen down very carefully. She looked at the notepad for a long moment. Then she looked at me. The evaluation changes the legal basis of the provision entirely, she said. Her voice was level. If the signature can be challenged... She stopped. She pressed her fingers flat against the notepad. Marcus loses the leverage, not just the vote, the leverage underneath the vote. She was quiet for a moment. Everything he's been holding for 2 years. All of it built on a document that can now be legally challenged. She looked at the notepad again. Then she said, very quietly, something that was not about the legal strategy or the board meeting at all. Did he? She started. She stopped. She looked at the wall. Was he? She stopped again. She pressed her lips together, waiting herself out. I tapped the number for her. He said something specific. She looked at me. I began tapping through the message one category at a time. Slowly. Carefully. He knows you've been fighting. He's been fighting too. The evaluation exists for 8 months. He heard what you said on your birthday. Nothing to be sorry for. He's been watching you run the company. You're doing exactly what he would have done. He said that's not a small thing. She read each piece as I tapped it. Her face did not change. The operational layer held completely through every single word. Controlled, steady. When I finished, she looked at the notepad for a long time. The room was very quiet. The city moved below the windows without knowing anything. Then she reached down and picked me up and held me against her chest the way she had twice before. She stood at the window and looked out. She did not say anything. She just stood there and breathed and looked at the city and held me against her, and I did not move or make a sound. After a while, she said, very quietly, 9 days. The board meeting, still counting, still moving, still entirely in forward motion always. But her arms were a little tighter than the other times she had held me, just slightly, just enough that I could feel the difference clearly. I stayed still and let her stand there for as long as she needed, and the city moved below us, and 9 days felt like a very different number now. Not smaller, not easier, but different. The way a number changes when you're no longer carrying it completely alone in a penthouse at night. The way things change when someone fighting in a room you cannot reach has been fighting back the whole time, and you finally know it for certain. 9 days. Marcus had one more vote to collect, and no idea what had just happened in a room on the 8th floor east of the city tonight. I pressed my head gently against her collarbone once. She did not say anything. She just stood there and breathed and held on and looked at the lights. That was enough. For tonight, that was exactly enough for both of us and the city below and the 9 days still waiting to be moved through. Drop a comment. What do you think Marcus is going to offer Beck? Because what he puts on that table next episode is something nobody sees coming. Marcus met Beck Junseo on a Wednesday evening at a private club on the 31st floor of a building I had never entered before. The club was called Meridian. Members only. The kind of place where the front door has no sign because the people who belong already know. I went through the east wall at 7:45 and found the private room in the back where 2 men were already sitting with drinks. Marcus looked the same as always. Easy, warm, patient. The specific patience of a man who has been counting down for a very long time. Beck Junseo was 64. Quiet face. The kind of man who had spent decades being the second most important person in every room. He sat across from Marcus with his hands folded on the table and listened with the careful attention of someone who weighs things slowly. "I'll be direct with you," Marcus said. He always said this right before being indirect. I had noticed the pattern across 3 separate conversations. Elena is brilliant. Nobody disputes that. But brilliant people operating without oversight create specific kinds of institutional risk. He let that sit for a moment. Beck did not fill the silence. He just looked at Marcus and waited. A patient man recognizing another patient man. The Eastern portfolio expansion, the logistics restructuring, both made without full board consultation, both carrying significant exposure. If either of those positions moves against us in the next 18 months, the company's liability without documented board approval is severe. Beck nodded slowly, not agreeing, just acknowledging that the words had arrived and been received and were being considered carefully. "What I am proposing is simple," Marcus said. "A formal oversight structure, a competency review that establishes documented governance going forward." He reached into his jacket. I expected the proxy document, the same folded paper he had placed in front of Shin without pushing it forward. But this time it was different. 2 documents. He placed them both on the table and left his hand flat beside them without touching either. "The first is the proxy vote for the review," he said. "The second is a proposal for your appointment as co-chair of the Oversight Committee." Beck looked at the 2 documents. He did not touch them. He looked at them the way you look at something you need to see clearly before deciding. Co-chair. Not just a vote. A position. Authority. The specific offer you make to a man who has spent decades being second and knows it. I felt him consider it. The weight of it moving through him slowly. Not greed exactly. Something more like the pull of finally being seen properly. Marcus was good at this. He found the specific thing each person had been waiting for and put it on the table in front of them, precisely. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. He said it the way you say something you have been saving. The specific tone of a final card being placed. He reached back into his jacket and took out a 3rd document, thinner than the others. He put it on top of them and sat back in his chair. "My father's company acquired a significant stake in Hanyang Medical Partners 14 months ago," he said, casually, conversationally. Hanyang Medical Partners manages several care facilities in the Eastern District. He picked up his glass, including Hanyang Care. He looked at Beck over the rim of his glass. "I mention this only because I understand your brother has been a resident there for 6 years. Beck's hands on the table changed, barely visible. But I was watching very carefully, and I felt the shift before I saw it. Cold, fast, deep. "The facility is exceptional," Marcus said. Warm, generous, entirely without threat in his voice. Pure warmth, all the way through the surface. "I'd like it to stay that way for everyone currently receiving care there. Continuity of excellent care is something I feel strongly about." He set his glass down. He looked at the 3 documents on the table. He did not look at Beck. He gave him the space to make the calculation. This was not the same approach as Shin. Shin had been offered a proxy and the comfort of institutional language and the illusion of choice. Beck was being shown something much darker, wrapped in exactly the same warmth. The same easy voice, the same patient, generous smile. Marcus had Hanyang Care. He had Elena's father in one wing and Beck's brother in another, and he had been holding both for different lengths of time. I sat against the wall and felt something move through my 9 tails that was not the gentle waking-up glow of the past several weeks. Something sharper, something older, something that recognized what it was looking at across the room and did not find it acceptable at all. Beck picked up the proxy document. He looked at it for a long time. Marcus waited. He was very good at waiting. He had done it for 3 years. Then Beck set it back down. He picked up his drink. He took 1 sip. He set it down. He looked at Marcus directly for the first time. "I'll need 48 hours, Beck said. His voice was completely level. Nothing in it that Marcus could read as refusal. Nothing as agreement. Marcus smiled. "Of course," he said. "Take the time you need." He left the documents on the table. He did not take them back. Deliberate. They finished their drinks. They talked about nothing for 11 minutes. Marcus left first, easy and warm all the way to the door. Beck sat alone at the table for 4 minutes after Marcus left. He looked at the 3 documents. He looked at his hands. He breathed carefully. Then he picked up his phone. He sat for a moment with it in his hand without dialing. He put it back down. He picked up the documents. He folded them once, put them in his jacket, stood up, walked out. I watched him go and felt what was moving through him like a cold current. Not decision yet, but close to it. A man being moved toward something he did not want to be moved toward with very few places to stand firm. I went back through the wall and into the night and moved toward the penthouse faster than I had moved through the city before. Something urgent. Elena was at the window when I came in, not at her desk, standing at the window looking at the city with her arms crossed at her chest. She turned when she heard me. She looked at my face, at whatever a fox face shows when it has just seen something that needs immediate action. She picked up the notepad. She picked up the pen. "Tell me," she said. No preamble, no build-up. Just the 2 words and the pen ready. I tapped through everything. Marcus, Meridian, 3 documents, co-chair offer, Hanyang Medical Partners. The brother, the 48 hours. She wrote each piece without speaking. Her face was completely still. The operational layer held perfectly throughout every single word again. When I finished, she looked at the notepad. She looked at it for longer than she usually looked at anything. That told me something by itself. He owns the facility, she said. I'm not surprised. Processing. Not just a care arrangement managed through this facility. He owns the parent company. She looked at the wall. That means the provision in my father's care arrangement isn't just a document. It's backed by actual ownership. She pressed her fingers flat on the notepad. Challenging the signature gets harder if he owns the company administering the care. Much harder. She was quiet for a moment. I could feel her moving through calculations at the speed she always moved through them. Fast. Total. No gaps. Beck's brother, she said. She looked at the notepad. 6 years at Hanyang Care. Marcus positioned this 14 months ago, before he moved on Shin. She looked at me. He's been building this for over a year. Every piece placed, every person identified. Hanyang Medical was never about the care. She sat down in the chair near the window. Not her desk chair. The chair she sat in when she talked to me in the evenings. The thinking chair. The evaluation my father had done, she said. If we challenge the provision signature and Marcus responds by moving the care arrangement. She stopped. She looked at her hands. The evaluation has to be filed before he can respond. Before he knows it exists. Same 48 hours. She looked at me. Beck has 48 hours. I have the same window. If I file before Beck gives Marcus the proxy, the leverage shifts. She stood up. She picked up her phone. She looked at it for 1 second. The specific second of a person deciding to move without a net. Then she dialed. It rang twice. I need you to file the cognitive evaluation with the Court of Civil Jurisdiction tonight, she said. Tonight. She listened. I understand the hour. File it anyway. The supporting documentation from the original signing is already in your possession. She listened again. Yes, all of it. Tonight. She hung up. She made a second call immediately. Then a third. Each one short and precise. When she finished the calls, she stood in the middle of the room and looked at nothing for a moment. Just stood. Just breathed. Just was there. Then she turned and looked at me. 36 hours, she said. That's how long it takes to process an emergency civil filing. 36 hours. If it goes through before Beck signs the proxy, Marcus loses the legal basis for the provision. The ownership of Hanyang doesn't matter anymore. She looked at the notepad on the chair. If it doesn't go through in time, she stopped. She did not finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I looked at her and felt the weight of 36 hours settle between us in the room. Heavy, specific, entirely without room for error now. She looked at me. There's something else, she said. She said it the way you say something you have been deciding whether to say for a while. Marcus doesn't know about the evaluation, but he knows I've been using a lawyer he can't trace. He's known for about 3 months. She looked at the window. He's been waiting for me to move. Whatever I do next, he's going to respond within hours. He's been ready. Which means the moment the filing goes in, he knows. And the moment he knows, he's going to move on Beck before the 48 hours finish. She looked at me. I need Beck not to sign for 36 hours, that's all. 36 hours of him not answering Marcus's calls. She looked at the notepad. I can't contact Beck directly. If I do, Marcus finds out I know about the meeting. Everything accelerates badly. She looked at me with the expression she used when she was about to ask something she considered significant, direct, unguarded, completely real. Can you get to him, she said. Not his office, his home. Can you get there without... She stopped. Can you do that without it being traced back? I looked at her. I thought about walls, about how they felt now, not like suggestions anymore, like air, like nothing at all between spaces. I thought about the 5th tail that had been glowing for 8 days, about the 6th tail that had started moving on its own 2 nights ago. I raised my paw and held it. Yes. She looked at the paw. She looked at my face. She made the decision in less than 3 seconds. She nodded. His address is in the second file on my laptop, she said. The folder marked building records. It's not his official address, the real one. She looked at me for one more moment. Be careful, she said. The same 2 words as the night I went to Yoon's office, but different now, more weight, more specific. The two words of someone who has started to understand that careful means something real and significant to her now. I left at midnight. Baek Junseo lived in a quiet residential building in the Northern District, 7 floors, the kind of building where people value not being noticed. His apartment was on the 5th floor. I went through the outer wall at ground level and took the stairs, through the stairwell walls, 1 floor at a time. His lights were still on. Past midnight, and his lights were still on, which told me the 48 hours were already moving through him like weather. I went through the apartment wall and found him at his kitchen table with the 3 documents from Meridian spread open in front of him. He had a glass of water, untouched. He was looking at the documents the way you look at something you have been looking at for hours already. I sat near the kitchen doorway and let him feel that something had changed in the room. He looked up slowly. He looked at me for a long time. A white fox, 9 tails. At his kitchen table past midnight. He looked at me with the specific exhaustion of a man who had run out of surprise entirely. "You're not what I was expecting," he said. Very quiet, very steady. The voice of a man who had been alone with a hard thing for several hours. I walked forward slowly and sat across the table from him. I looked at the 3 documents. I looked at his face. I waited for him to understand. He looked at me. "She sent you," he said. The same words Elena's father had said. The same conclusion reached the same way, same family pattern. I looked at the documents. He watched me look at them. He understood I had been in that room. He understood I knew what was on the table. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "My brother has been at that facility for 6 years," he said. "He won't move well. He's settled. He knows the staff." He looked at his water glass. Marcus didn't threaten anything directly. He never does. But the implication was... He stopped. He already knew I knew. I tapped on the table. 1 tap. "Yes." He looked at the tap. He looked at me. Something shifted in his face. A man realizing the fox already knows everything. "What does she need?" he said. Direct. The directness of someone who has been sitting alone with something complicated and is ready to simplify it. I tapped on the table slowly. The system Elena and I had built did not work without her on the other end, but I had something else now. The 6th tail had been moving on its own for 2 nights. I'd been pressing it flat, not ready, not certain, not sure what it meant yet. I let it move. It extended toward the table slowly. Beck watched it. The tip of it touched the surface of the document closest to him. The proxy vote. The paper moved, slid away from him, slowly, across the table, until it dropped off the far edge and landed face down on the floor. Beck stared at the floor where the document had landed. He looked at the remaining 2 documents, the co-chair proposal, the Hanyang paper. He looked at me. I looked back at him. He sat with that for a long moment. Then he picked up his water glass and finally took a sip. 36 hours, he said quietly. Like he had done a calculation I had not shown him, but he had arrived at anyway on his own. Smart man. "If she files something in the next 36 hours that changes the legal basis of the arrangement..." He stopped. He looked at the documents. "Then the implication Marcus made stops being an implication," he said, "because the legal structure underneath it changes. It has no teeth." He set the glass down. He picked up the co-chair document. He looked at it carefully. He put it back on the table without committing to anything. "I'm not going to sign the proxy," he said, quietly, to himself as much as to me, like confirming something he had already decided before I arrived. "I was never going to sign it," he said. "I needed to know if there was a reason to hold for 36 hours that wasn't just my own discomfort." He looked at me. "Tell her," he started. He almost smiled. "Actually, I'll tell her myself. After the 36 hours. I'll call directly." He looked at the proxy document on the floor. He did not pick it up. He left it there and looked back at the remaining 2 on the table. I stayed for a few more minutes. He sat with his water and his documents and his 36 hours in the quiet of a decision made and settled. Before I left, I looked at him once more from the kitchen doorway. He was already on his phone, not calling Marcus, looking something up, planning. The Northern District was quiet at this hour. I moved through the streets toward the penthouse and felt the 6th tail moving freely now. Easy, like something that had been waiting for permission and had finally been given it. It did not need any further convincing to be what it was. Elena was awake. She was standing at the window again. She turned when I came through the door and looked at me and waited. I walked to the notepad on the chair. I tapped on it once. She picked it up. I tapped the word we had for confirmed. She looked at me. "He's not signing," she said. Not a question. A conclusion. I tapped once. "Yes." She looked at the notepad. She wrote 36 hours and circled it. Then she wrote Beck and drew a line from his name to the circle and sat looking at what she had written for a long moment in the quiet room. "The filing went in at 1:17 this morning," she said. "My lawyer confirmed 10 minutes ago. The court clock is running." 36 hours for the filing. 36 hours for Beck. The same window. The same 36 hours. Running simultaneously toward the same point. She looked at me. "Marcus is going to find out about the filing within the hour," she said. "He has a contact inside the civil court system. When he finds out, he's going to call Beck immediately. And when Beck doesn't answer..." She paused. "He's going to come here, personally." She looked at the window. At the city below. At the lights of the building Marcus lived in, visible from where she was standing, 6 blocks east. "He's going to come here and tell me to withdraw the filing," she said. "He's going to tell me what happens if I don't withdraw it." She turned away from the window and looked at me with an expression that had something in it I had not seen before. Not fear, not anger, readiness. The specific quality of someone who has been preparing for one moment for a very long time and can finally see it arriving. "Let him come," she said, quietly. The same voice she used for everything. Level, controlled, completely certain of what she was doing. She sat in the thinking chair. She looked at the notepad. She looked at me. "I want to tell you something," she said, differently from usual. Not operational, not strategic. The other voice, the one from the kitchen, from the locked room doorway, from the window with her arms tight. 3 years ago, when my father had the stroke, I was in Tokyo closing an acquisition," she said. "I got on the first flight. It took 9 hours. By the time I landed, the board had already met. Marcus had already presented the emergency succession framework he had apparently prepared." She looked at the notepad. "I walked into the building and went straight to my father's office, and Marcus was already sitting behind the desk." She was quiet for a moment. "He stood up when I came in. He was very kind about it. He said he was just keeping things warm until I got settled." She almost smiled. Not quite. The memory of what almost smiling felt like in that moment. I sat down across from him and I said, "Okay." I said, "Okay," and I took the folder he slid across the desk and I read every document in it that night, and I understood exactly what he had done. She looked at me. He had spent years building a structure that would activate the moment my father was incapacitated. Patient, thorough, complete. And I spent the next 3 years building a structure that would activate the moment he moved against me. Same patience, same thoroughness. She looked at the window. The difference is that he built his structure to take something. I built mine to protect something, different foundations. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My father told me once that the person who knows what they're actually fighting for always outlasts the person who's just fighting to win." She looked at the notepad, at the circle around 36 hours, at Bayek's name with the line running to it, at everything she had written. "He was right," she said. "He was right about that." She said it the way you say something when you have tested it over a long time and confirmed it. The city moved outside the window. 34 hours left on the filing. Marcus would know within the hour. He would come. She was ready. I jumped up onto the arm of the thinking chair and sat there beside her. She looked at me. She did not pick me up. She just looked. "Whatever you are," she said. "Whatever this is." She looked at the city. "I'm glad it was you." She said it simply, without performance. I sat beside her on the arm of the chair, and the city moved below, and both of us waited for the hour that was coming without hurrying toward it. Marcus arrived at 4 a.m. The elevator opened, and he walked out, and he was not warm this time. Not easy. Not patient at all. He was still controlled. Marcus was always controlled. But the warmth was entirely gone, and what was underneath it was visible for the first time. Elena was sitting at her desk when he came in. She had not moved from the desk in 2 hours. She had been ready since 1:17 exactly. I was on the desk beside her. He looked at me when he entered. He looked at me longer than he had any of the other times. Something registered. "Withdraw the filing," he said. He stood in the middle of the room. He did not sit down. He did not take anything from his jacket. Just stood. Elena looked at him. "No," she said. One word. The complete absence of everything except the word itself. Clean and entirely without decoration. "Elena!" He said her name like a warning wrapped in something that wanted to sound like concern. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand exactly what I'm doing," she said. Same voice, same level, like they were discussing a calendar item, like this was nothing at all. "The evaluation gets filed and the provision gets challenged and the whole structure comes apart," he said, "including the care arrangement, including your father's stability, his doctors, everything that's been consistent for 3 years. All of it gets reviewed if this goes forward." Elena looked at him. "My father's cognitive evaluation was conducted 7 months ago by a private specialist," she said. "He's already made arrangements." Something moved across Marcus's face, fast, controlled immediately, but there for 1 second. The specific expression of a calculation failing. "The provision signature was obtained during a period of documented cognitive compromise," she said. "The court will move to invalidate it. When the provision is invalidated, the care arrangement reverts to my father's own documented wishes, which he has already filed separately." She looked at him steadily. "He's been preparing for this for 7 months, Marcus, while you were counting votes in private dining rooms." Marcus stood very still. The control was total, but I could feel underneath it. Something shifting fast. The specific feeling of ground moving. "You can't prove the signature was compromised," he said. "You have 1 private evaluation. I have 3 years of documented care management." "You have 3 years of documented care management built on a provision that will be invalidated," she said. "Those aren't the same thing." She picked up the pen on her desk. She set it down again. A small gesture, completely deliberate. "And I have Yoon's files," she said. Something went very still in Marcus. The kind of still that is not calm. The kind that is a person understanding that a wall they thought was solid has a door in it. "Transfer records," she said. 14 months of them. "And a letter with your signature authorizing the Hanyang medical acquisition through Yoon." She looked at him. "The acquisition that you have never disclosed to the board. The one that creates a direct conflict of interest in this vote." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. He looked at me on the desk beside her. He looked back at her. Something had finished moving in him. "What do you want?" he said. The first completely direct thing he had said since he walked in. No warmth, no framing, just the question itself. Elena looked at him. Your resignation from the board, she said, filed before the meeting. Voluntary, clean. No statement about the reason. The care arrangement transfers to my father's own documented wishes immediately. The Hanyang conflict of interest stays out of the board record. She picked up the pen again. You walk away with everything you came into this with. Your position in your own company, your reputation intact. She set the pen down. Or the filing moves forward. The provision falls, Yoon's records go to the board, and the conflict of interest becomes public. She looked at him steadily. You're thorough, I know that. But you built your structure on two things that turned out not to be true. She looked at the window, at the city, at the 6 blocks east where his building stood with its lights still on. You thought I was alone. She looked back at him. And you thought my father was incapacitated. She said it simply, without triumph. Just the fact of it. Clean and clear. Marcus stood in the middle of the room. He looked at Elena. He looked at me. He looked at the desk between them and everything on it. He was quiet for a long time. The city moved outside. The clock on the wall moved. The 36 hours kept running in one direction only. Then he said, I'll need until morning to have the documentation prepared. His voice was completely level, all the way to the surface, controlled. You have until 8, Elena said. The filing proceeds at 8 if I haven't received confirmation. She did not look away from him once. He nodded once. He turned. He walked back to the elevator. The doors closed. He was gone. The penthouse was quiet again and entirely different. Elena sat at her desk for a moment. She looked at the notepad, at the circle around 36 hours, at everything that had been written in it. Then she looked at me on the desk beside her, and something in her face finally let go of what it had been holding for a very long time. Not collapse. Elena Choy did not collapse. But the layer that had been on for 3 years, for 9 hours on a flight from Tokyo, for every meeting in this penthouse, it rested. Just for a moment. It rested. She reached out and put her hand on top of my head and left it there and looked at the city and breathed and did not say anything at all. At 7:53, her phone showed a notification. Her lawyer. Confirmation of receipt. Marcus had filed the voluntary resignation at 7:49. She looked at the notification. She set the phone down face up on the desk. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at me. She almost smiled. The real version. The one from the photograph. Tired and real and entirely without performance of any kind at all. He had good taste, she said, quietly. The same words she had used about me the first week when Marcus had snapped his fingers and I had walked away. I looked at her. She looked at me. The city was getting light outside the windows, the specific gray gold of early morning arriving without announcement. I'm going to see my father today, she said. She said it like something she had not said out loud in a very long time, like the words were new again. I'm going to go to the facility and walk through the front door and sit with him. She looked at the window. Nobody is watching the entrance anymore. She looked at me. Will you come? She said. Simply. The way she asked things when she actually wanted to know. Without the operational layer. Just the question. I looked at her. I thought about the 8th floor east wing, the room with the window and the 2 books and the folded newspaper on the small table. The man who had looked at me past midnight and said she sent you like a conclusion. Who had held documents against his chest the same way she held things. Who had said I'd been watching her run that company from in here and stopped before the last word and let the stopped word be the whole thing. I raised my paw and held it. Yes. She looked at the paw. She looked at my face. She nodded once. She stood up from the desk. She picked me up. She held me against her chest. She walked to the elevator. The doors opened. We went down together in the early morning light. The lobby was quiet. The city outside was beginning. She walked through the front door and into the gray gold morning with me in her arms. 6 blocks east, then north, then the facility at the end of a quiet street with trees that had been there longer than the building had. She walked through the front entrance. The staff at the desk looked up. She said her name. They looked at each other. One of them stood up. Ms. Choy, the woman said, something careful in her voice, the careful of someone who has been told one thing for a long time and is adjusting. No one told us you were coming, she said, apologetically, like she had failed at something, like there should have been preparation. That's all right, Elena said. I know the way. She walked past the desk toward the elevator. The woman watched her go and said nothing. 8th floor, east wing, 3rd door from the elevator bank. Elena walked the corridor, and I felt her breathing change as she got closer. Not more afraid, just more real. The breathing of someone arriving somewhere they have been trying to get to for a very long time. She stopped in front of the door. She stood there for 1 moment. Then she opened it and walked in, and I felt everything in her go entirely still. He was awake. He was sitting up in the bed. He looked at the door when it opened, and he looked at Elena, and neither of them moved at all. For a moment, the room was just the 2 of them, and the window and the morning light coming through it, and the city somewhere outside below. Then he said her name, just her name, the way you say a word when it means too many things to say any of the other words around it. She walked to the chair beside his bed and sat down and put her hand over his on the folded newspaper and held it there. She did not speak yet. He looked at me in her arms. He looked at her. He almost smiled. The real version, tired and genuine, the one from the photograph. You found a good one, he said. She looked at me. She looked at her father. He found me, she said, quietly, correctly. That was the truth of it. I sat in her arms in a room on the 8th floor east of the city, and the morning came through the window, and neither of them needed to say anything more. 3 weeks and 2 days since I had opened my eyes in a crystal cage on a private jet. 3 weeks since Elena Choy had said, "You're mine now." 3 weeks since I had been a white fox with 9 tails, and no idea what I was, or what any of this was going to mean in the end. I still did not know what I was exactly. I still did not know why I had ended up here, or what the 9 tails were becoming, or how fast. What I knew was this room. This woman sitting in a chair beside her father's bed, holding his hand in the morning light without speaking. What I knew was a notepad with circles on it, and a piano with dusty keys, and a locked room that was no longer locked in 36 hours. What I knew was that walls felt like air now, and the 6th tail moved on its own, and the 7th had started glowing faintly 2 days ago. What I knew was that I had been a guy with ramen and a dying plant, and a Tuesday that ended badly, and somehow that had led me exactly here. To a room where 2 people who had been fighting alone in separate buildings for 3 years were finally sitting in the same space together. To a woman who said useful when she meant something much larger, and be careful when she meant something she did not yet have words for. I pressed my head gently against her arm once. She looked down at me. The almost smile again. The real version, tired and entirely without performance. "Thank you," she said, quietly, to me. Just that. 2 words. The most she had ever given anything in 1 sentence since I had known her. I looked at her. I looked at her father. I looked at the morning coming through the window and the city below, and the day beginning without us. That was enough. For today, for this room, for all of it. That was exactly and completely enough, and I would not have changed a single thing. The 7th tail glowed in the morning light. I let it. Whatever was coming next, whatever I was still becoming, I was ready for it. I was ready for whatever this world needed from a 9-tailed fox who had started as nobody and ended up exactly where he was supposed to be. If you want to see what happens when Kai's power fully awakens, and what Elena does when she finally figures out exactly what he is, drop a comment below. Every one of them counts, and if you're new here, you know what to do.